In this Warmaster video we're going to take a look at the Araby army. Araby was one of the last armies to be officially supported by Games Workshop with its own model range. The Warmaster Araby faction is based upon several historical factions from our own history, such as the Arabs, the Persian Empire and various North African tribes. The Warmaster Araby army is the only official representation of the faction ever released by Games Workshop. The lore behind the faction draws its inspiration from various folktales including Aladdin, the Arabian Nights and El Cid. The faction of Araby is essentially a collection of independent city-states ruled over by a caliph or sultan. Araby is a desert land situated to the extreme northwest of the Southlands. This lies directly south of the Old World, and as the majority of Arabian city-states are coastal, contact between Araby and the Old World is not uncommon, and this alternates between trade and warfare. To the east of the Arabian city-states lies the Great Desert of Araby, and beyond this lies the land of the dead, inhabited only by the tomb kings of Nehekhara. This proximity has led to many great battles between the two nations. As each Arabian city-state is effectively autonomous, trade or territorial disputes between independent cities can lead to open warfare. The most infamous period of Arabian history was the imperial year 1435, when the great Sultan Jafar managed to unite the Arabian city-states into one army. He then launched a mass invasion of the Old World, landing in Estalia and decimating that nation. Jafar also launched attacks upon the lands of Bretonia and Tilia. However, this did provoke the nations of the Old World to unite into one alliance and drive the Arabian armies out. The armies of Bretonia and the Empire then launched a crusade to invade Araby. Once Sultan Jafar was slain, some of the Old Worlders decided to settle in Araby and carve out empires of their own, whilst those that returned to the Old World founded their own military orders such as the Imperial Knights Panther and the Bretonian Knights Errant. In battle, the Arabian army can call upon several units of excellent cavalry, supported by light infantry and archers. They also have access to several fantastic units such as mighty war elephants, flying carpets, and genies. In Warmaster, this makes the Araby army very aggressive, with access to mobile, hard-hitting, and terrifying troops, all supported with powerful magics. You can also represent an Araby army on the tabletop by collecting miniatures from various historical manufacturers, as the original Games Workshop models are both very rare and very expensive. The Araby army list features 8 different types of troops and 3 different types of character. You must take 2 units of spearmen and 2 units of bowmen for every 1,000 points in your army, and you must always take 1 general. You have unlimited access to the excellent knights and desert riders, whilst the more exotic and powerful units are restricted. The character selection is standard for a human faction. Your compulsory spearmen units have the standard light infantry profile, which is common to all human armies. Spearmen are therefore cheap and plentiful and can be used to bolster your breakpoint. As your army features no artillery, one of the best uses for spearmen is to support your archers and the more elite infantry units. Your compulsory bowmen also have the standard missile infantry profile, which is common to all human armies. Their lack of armour means you must protect them by either placing them in dense terrain or providing them with infantry support. A line of bowmen supported by a line of spears has a good chance of repelling all but the heaviest of infantry charges. Your bowmen's missile attacks are best used for projecting threat across the battlefield and causing confusion. Araby also has access to a medium infantry unit named Guards, who have a profile identical to other medium infantry units such as Elves and Marauders. They also have a special rule which allows the general only to order them with a command value of 10 on their first order each turn. This is useful, but is very situational, as you need your guards to be in the right place at the right time when they receive the order to make the maximum use from it. Still, a brigade of guards will give you a solid infantry corps that can contest enemy in dense terrain. Your knights have the standard heavy cavalry profile, which is common to the majority of factions in Warmaster. Knights are reliable hammer troops. They can reliably engage and beat enemy cavalry even when they don't get the charge. They are a good counter to single monsters, and they can reliably ride down enemy infantry that is foolish enough to be in the open. Desert Riders have the standard light cavalry profile that is common to several units in Warmaster, and this gives them access to the trial rules for light cavalry in Warmaster Revolution. This means they can evade from the nearest enemy in any direction, and if they are charged in the front, only enemy light cavalry or flyers or troops that can pursue all can pursue them in combat. This makes Desert Riders ideal for forming a disposable skirmish screen at the head of your army. Use your Desert Riders to lure enemy cavalry and monsters into a trap for your knights, or send them up the flanks to harass enemy missile infantry and artillery with their shooting attack. They're also good for imposing the -1 command penalty to enemy characters due to enemy proximity. Camel Riders are a unique Araby unit. They have the standard medium cavalry profile, but also gain a 30 cm shooting attack. Their special rules mean that units or brigades including Camel Riders always suffer a -1 command penalty, but camels can also ignore distance modifiers to command. This means it's often best to use units and brigades of Camel Riders as flanking forces away from the rest of the army. Their shooting attack makes them useful for harassment, but also provides a solid defensive boost, should the enemy send their own cavalry to engage them. Camels are more than just missile troops though. Camels can also be confidently sent to charge all but the heaviest of enemy infantry units, which will sometimes catch the enemy off guard. Magic Carpets are the first fantasy unit in the army. They represent squadrons of archers, fire throwers and other missile troops mounted on flying carpets. They count as flying cavalry, which can be pursued by any other unit type. They are next to useless in melee combat, but have 2 shooting attacks per stand. This means one unit can deliver 6 shooting attacks to virtually anywhere on the battlefield. This makes them perfect for taking out enemy artillery units, or killing off entire stands of enemy flyers. Your elephants are your strongest hammer unit, and in my opinion they are the most cost-effective monster unit in the game. A charging unit of elephants can dish out 21 attacks against enemy cavalry, enemy monsters, or enemy infantry in the open. Elephants also cause terror, which will dramatically reduce the amount of damage you will take in return. If they catch them in the open, a charging unit of elephants will defeat any other unit in the game, even dragon ogres. My personal preference is always take as many units of elephants as you can fit in the army. Their only downside is confusion, as they will stampede instead of becoming confused. But even if they do stampede, there is a chance they will charge the enemy anyway. To stop the enemy confusing them with missiles, you can always designate a unit of infantry to be elephant herders to protect them from enemy missile fire, by keeping the infantry closer to the enemy shooters. The Araby general has the standard general profile common to the vast majority of armies in Warmaster. With the highest command value in the army, the best use for your general is to use him to issue the critical orders that will get your key units where you need them to be. It can be tempting to build brigades of guards and use your general to order them every turn, but in my opinion a far better use for the general is to issue orders to your elephants and knights. The Araby hero also has a standard profile for heroes throughout Warmaster. Heroes can relieve the burden on your general by keeping the less critical brigades moving. You can also mount a hero on a war elephant mount to add extra attacks and terror to any combat you wish. This can work especially well when a hero is used to support your knights. Araby wizards also have the standard human wizard profile common to many armies in Warmaster. They are cheap enough to include 2 at 2000 points and can be used to issue orders when your army becomes spread out. Wizards can also take a djinn as a character mount. This is an excellent flying monster which brings terror and bonus attacks to a melee combat. It also has a shooting attack and grants the wizard a bonus to cast one of his spells. In my opinion, this makes the djinn one of the most versatile character mounts in the game, and I will always find room for one in my army. It also has the rule of cool. By bringing wizards, you also get access to the Araby spell list, which is one of the strongest in the game in my opinion. Sandstorm is ideal for disrupting enemy command, especially if you've mounted your wizard on a flying mount such as a magic carpet or a djinn. Simply fly the wizard behind enemy lines and cast this spell. Just remember to keep your wizard within 30 centimeters of a friendly unit so he can escape if attacked. Undead players hate this spell. Another excellent and unique spell on the Araby list is Mirage. This has a 60 centimeter range and is cast on a 4+. It allows you to place a decoy unit anywhere outside of 20 centimeters of the enemy. The opposing army must treat your Mirage unit as a real enemy until they can move into base contact with it, at which point it is dispelled. This makes the Mirage perfect for absorbing enemy missile fire, leaving the rest of your army unharmed. The Mirage can also be used to lure charges from units that must use their initiative to charge. Because such fanatic style units are usually infantry, they will have to move to within 20 centimeters with their first order. They then suffer the -1 command penalty for the Mirage as their second order, which they may fail. In their following turn, they then have to use their initiative to charge the Mirage, which prevents them moving any further that turn. They will now be stuck out of position and can be countercharged at your leisure. Sunstrike is a common type of shooting spell found in many other Warmaster armies. It is very good for causing mass confusion or adding a few hits to a combat. Curse of the Djinn is a very useful spell when fighting enemies that have heavy armour, and a wizard mounted on a djinn gets a bonus to cast this spell. Because the Araby list contains so many good spells, it's often worth bringing a Ring of Magic on your wizard to give you that critical boost at the right time. As the Araby army list contains so many good options, it's actually quite hard to build what I would consider to be a bad list. For example, you could build an infantry heavy list with a high breakpoint and hope to win via attrition. The downside to this is that it may not work against true horde armies. Or you could go for a more elite build with a lot of guards and knights to take the fight to your enemy. But this build may not work against enemies that have better quality infantry than you or good artillery. You could go for a knight heavy army with terror causing heroes in support, and this is quite a strong option provided the enemy doesn't have access to dense terrain. However, at 2000 points my preferred tournament build is as follows: a little bit of everything. In this list I have 2 units of elephants and 2 units of knights to provide the hammer, enough infantry to raise the breakpoint, desert riders, camel riders and magic carpets to provide harassment, with 2 wizards and a djinn to provide magical support and terror. And at time of writing I am lucky enough never to have lost a game with this army. But more importantly, it's immensely fun to play with, as it incorporates all the best aspects of the list. So, why would you choose to play Araby? Well, they're a desert faction, so if you enjoy making desert scenery, this could be the army for you. Another reason could be the Arabian Nights aesthetic, and if, like me, you grew up watching Sinbad films, you get to recreate all your favourite characters in 10mm scale. Alternatively, you may already own a historical army, and Araby is an easy port across from Carthaginian, Persian or Arab ancients armies. Maybe you really want to paint up a cool looking genie. But for me, playing an Araby army means you get to recreate that scene from the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in Return of the King. And who doesn't like the idea of squishing the enemy's elite troops underfoot with your horde of rampaging elephants? Araby is what I would describe as a toolbox army, as it features units capable of dealing with virtually any situation you will face in battle. It has the strongest monster unit in the game, the elephants, an excellent and unique spell list, multiple sources of terror, 3 different types of cavalry providing excellent mobility, and the fantasy version of Apache gunships. So the biggest weakness of the Araby army in my opinion is the lack of artillery. With no long-ranged firepower, you have no way of forcing the enemy to abandon defended positions and come to you. Your infantry is only of average quality, so will struggle against armies that can field heavy infantry, especially if the enemy has access to dense terrain. Also, you have no access to armour-piercing shooting, which means enemy that have heavy armour may be able to shrug off your shooting and outgrind you in combat. Thankfully, the army's spell list helps to mitigate all of these problems. So, what options do you have to defeat the forces of Araby? Well, any army that has access to artillery can effectively threaten the Araby elephants and Araby knights, forcing the Araby to neutralise your own artillery before they can launch their attacks. Araby magic carpets are very vulnerable to counterattacks, so always keep a unit in reserve to chase away the carpets. Although Araby elephants are extremely powerful when charging, they are vulnerable to being charged in the flank themselves, and in particular fanatic style units will do very well against them. Araby has no answer to enemy that can deploy heavy infantry in dense terrain, while neutralising the Araby magic phase with a dispel scroll or similar can rob them of the tools they need to mitigate their own weaknesses. Araby remain one of my favourite Warmaster armies, and hopefully this video has provided you with an insight on how to play with them and how to defeat them.